Okay, welcome back everyone to youtube.com/Ryan's Vedic Astrology, Asheville Vedic Astrology's YouTube channel. I'm back here with Fernando Raul Castro, and today we've got a few things we're going to talk about. The first one being the ideas of Rahu and Ketu, and in a sense their historical origins. So we were chatting about this, and I thought to myself, hey, we should just record this so people can hear it. So let's get back to where we were. So you were saying that Rahu and Ketu is a new development in many ways. So what were you getting at there?
Well, first of all, hi to all your viewers. Hi to you, Ryan. Thank you for bringing me here. We were just talking about, Vargas, talking about the nodes, and it's a very common belief that Rahu and Ketu have karmic significators to them, right? That Rahu is the future, Rahu is probably what is expanded and extrospected, and Ketu is what is expanded and extrospected within. I mean, expanded and introspected within, and what came before. And sometimes, well, not sometimes, many times, Rahu is alluded to future lives, and Ketu is alluded to past lives. And when I started learning Jyotish, you read that in books, in modern books. You read that from different authors. You see that on YouTube. But then, when you go to the classics, when you go to Brihad Jataka, when you go to Brihad Parashara Hora Shastra, even Prashna Marga or whatever, you will never, ever have a shloka or a sutra that says Rahu means future lives, or Ketu means past lives. Right. And then if you want to expand that, you read Hellenistic astrology texts, and they don't necessarily say anything about that either, in terms of alluding the notes to future and past lives. And I haven't really gone through, but I imagine that Muslim astrology does not say that either. So, and I was thinking, well, where does this come from? And that comes from this modern astrological reinterpretation that began in the 19th century, early 20th century with the theosophical astrology. And it also kind of came about with Dane Rudyard's interpretations of the planets. So it's very interesting, because this idea of the nodes being future lives, past lives, is a modern development in astrology that somehow has gotten itself into the practice and passes as something traditional. Right. And that is something that modern astrologers from Western, from a Western background say. That's something that Neo-Vedic astrologers say. That is something that even Indian traditional astrologers say, but that is not part of the tradition. It's something that is not even 100 years old. Right. So, yeah, so we have to take that, into consideration when we think about these things. However, this presents a problem, right? If Ketu is what you already have experience in, right, and Rahu is what you don't have experience in, then where does this come from, right? If the past life, future life paradigm is changed. And it also has to do with the modern interpretation of reincarnation. You see, traditionally, reincarnation was seen as something tedious, as something that you want to avoid. Right. Because who the fuck wants to come back, right? I mean, who wants to have his heart broken again and have his parents die and all that? And that's why moksha exists, the liberation, right? Your samadhi process. You want to leave the wheel of samsara and go to the next loka or whatever. And at the same time, from the Western paradigm, it's also seen like that. Specifically through a more traditional, more medieval Renaissance way of the Catholic perspective of your soul being saved and going to heaven, just leaving, right? Because man is something constant that is to be transcended. But in the modern concept, man is something that is becoming, right? And at the same time, reincarnation is seen through this modern perspective that was created through the modern reinterpretation of traditions that come from theosophical interpretations that at the same time mixed itself with modern psychology, and then it developed into this new age perception, and then you have all the weirdos, and you have all, I'm sorry, not weirdos, I'm sorry, you have all the different eclectic ideas where man is something that is becoming. We are evolving, we are progressing. Where are we going? Nobody knows, but we're going somewhere. And at the same time, reincarnation is seen as an evolutionary process, seen through the nodes, right? And at the same time, there's no epistemological background. There's no epistemological, philosophical, religious references to know how you're supposed to live, right? Because with religion, there were sins, there were laws, and if you broke them, you would go down. And you read that in the Bhagavad Gita. If you live a tamasic life, you will be born as a goat. If you live with sin, you're going to hell. But in evolutionary astrology, everything's subjective, everything's relativistic. Doesn't matter what you do, you're always progressing, and at the same time, you're stuck on Earth, right? You're not going to heaven, you're not going to moksha. I mean, and that's something that you have to take into consideration when you think about the nodes. And it's a big topic, but yeah, that's what I wanted to say,
Well, I had no idea I was going to open up that kind of can of worms.
Yeah, that's a big can of worms, brother. Yeah.
I completely follow what you're saying. I had recently just finished up a video for my Kriya Yoga YouTube channel on a very similar kind of wavelength, in that you reference the Bhagavad Gita. And the Bhagavad Gita, there are these references. Let me see if I have one up here. For example, it says, where was it? For example, it says, fearlessness, purity of heart, abiding in yoga along with knowledge, charitable giving, self-restraint, holy offerings, study of sacred texts, austerity, uprightness, nonviolence, truth, absence of anger, renunciation, serenity, freedom from finding fault, compassion for all beings, absence of cravings, gentleness, modesty, steadiness, vigor, forgiveness, fortitude, purity, freedom from malice and from pride. These are the endowments of one born to a divine destiny, and that one will come to me. And by me, it's a reference to Krishna in the field of pure being. Yep. And in yoga practice, going with the whole new age kind of idea, there's this sense that if you just get your mind right, if you just get everything right, then you'll have all the friends in the world that love you, you have the perfect relationship, the money you want, the career you want. But that's not what the Gita says. The Gita says by embodying these particular qualities, and earlier on it says things like enduring suffering while it lasts, finding absence from attachment and aversion, and that's what it says. Which is how you were talking about, you transcend this wheel of birth and death. It doesn't say things like, go consult your astrologer to find out what Rahu is telling you that you have no experience in, such that you can develop that thing.
Yeah.
And again, I think the way you described it, you said it was around, what, the mid-50s, somewhere around that time?
Well, that's the thing. You do the research, and nobody really knows. You go to evolutionary astrologers, and they can pinpoint the origin to certain authors, right? Specifically mid-20th century, but it all started more or less with, because we have to remember that historically, astrology in the West kind of died in the 18th century. And that's like the last developments of what we call traditional astrology through Renaissance astrology, which is like an offshoot of medieval astrology, which is an offshoot of Muslim astrology, which is an offshoot of Hellenistic astrology. And by the way, Hellenistic and Muslim influence Jyotish. So, right. And it's quite interesting because it almost died, but that was the moment when trans-Saturnian planets became, we started discovering them. And it almost died, but it kind of came back in the 19th century through, through Europe, obviously, through Spiritism, Cartesian Spiritism from France, and also it came back through these new theosophical schools, Blavatsky, which, by the way, Blavatsky in the beginning was very different from what theosophy became afterwards, and then with the break with anthroposophy And that's when, you know, Alan Leo and other astrologers began to reinterpret the traditional astrology from the modern perspective.
Right.
With the idea of progress, with the idea of evolution. And then came the psychological astrologers at the beginning of the 20th century. Specifically, you know, Carl Jung is a mixed bag, but Dane Rudyard is, you know, Dane Rudyard was a brain, and the way he wrote about it, placed the seeds for all these modern interpretations of the nodes, which is known in Western astrology as draconian astrology. Hence, you know, the Caput Draconis, the head of the dragon and the tail of the dragon, which is Rahu and Ketu. And they say that these ideas of future and past lives come from Vedic astrology, but when you read the classics, the only reference to past and future lives you're going to see is the 5th and the 9th. And sometimes the 9th is the past and the 5th is the future, and sometimes the 5th is the future and the 9th is the past.
Right.
And that's kind of confusing, because the 5th can be Purva Punja, but sometimes it's the future because it's the 5th house after the 1st, and the 9th is the 5th before the 1st. Right. And there's another reference where the 12th is past life, the 1st is present life, and the 2nd is future life. But you will never see anything about the notes, and you will never see anything about the D60 being something about past lives or future lives.
Right.
So this is like modern interpretations where progress, where evolution, come into center, because progress and evolution was not part of traditional thought. You know, the world wasn't something to be improved. You weren't something to be, well, you were something to be improved from a spiritual perspective, but from a physical, I mean, it didn't have to do that. You just had to do your things, your tapas, your mantras. You had to do your sacraments, your things, and transcend, you know, right. Leave this world, leave your body, moksha, or from the Western perspective, through heroic actions,
right.
Being a hero, choosing the Apollonian path, or choosing the Dionysian path. You know, it's all there, but through this modern perspective, we're just talking about astrology. We haven't talked about the other fields of human thought. We're just talking about how modernity has changed the way man sees the world, and hence changes the different ramifications of human thought, and one of them being astrology. The idea of evolutionary astrology. And then you get all these offshoots, because all the offshoots of modern astrology come from these theosophical interpretations, you know.
You know, with that said, I agree very much with a lot of what you're talking about. And
thank God.
yeah. I don't have. There's not a lot of criticism there. And I don't know if you've noticed, and maybe I haven't done it too often, but with the whole idea of past lives and future lives, what I personally have been trying to do is use the term using the theory of past lives.
Yes, I do that too. Yes.
Yeah, because I do think, and I wonder what your thoughts are on this. The reason I use the word theory of past lives is because it is a wonderful it's a wonderful model to talk to people about certain things with. You know, we don't necessarily, we can say we believe in past lives, and we can say that we've experienced other lifetimes and we remember those things. But, you know, my question is that true? Or is it just that your one point of awareness that's related to this mind, body, spirit right now just happened to catch a glimpse of another possible experience? It's just like you accidentally turn the channel and you see a whole different show for a little bit, and then you come back to your show. It doesn't work like that. I don't know. But if we say we use the theory of past lives, then what that means is we can still use Rahu and Ketu to try to share helpful information with the client. But then again, you know, at the end of it, doesn't really matter if you say theory of past lives or not, because the person on the other end is going to interpret it the way they're going to interpret it. Just like I recently wrote a small little book called Maha Avatar Babaji in the Garden of Faith. It's a little book, and the book is about a conversation with the Kriya Yoga master Maha Avatar Babaji and the student. And I'm thinking to myself, well, obviously people are going to know that this is not a true story. That's the way I'm thinking of it. But then someone actually made a comment on the Amazon review saying, this person doesn't even say it's a fake story. And I'm thinking, why do I have to say it's a fake story? What would make you think it was a true story? So from thinking about things in that way, knowing that humans do that kind of a thing, then how have you found to use Rahu and Ketu without kind of, I guess, misleading people? I mean, because obviously you're talking to people about their astrologer chart. You're a practicing astrologer. How do you approach that then? Well,
you just touch upon a subject that is very complicated, because you said that you use the words as the theory goes, right? What I say is, I'm going to tell you something that some astrologers use, but that I don't use. Right. And when you start explaining Rahu and Ketu with this past life, future life, or past and future paradigm, clients get it. Mm-hmm. I mean, and it's a good way to explain it. That's why it's stuck.
Right. Yes.
It's a good ribbon. I mean, it's stuck, and that's why we still use it, and that's why a lot of people use it, but they don't know where it came from. Mm-hmm. And to be honest, that's something that not a lot of people really know, bibliographically speaking, in terms of bibliography of where it came from, because, and that's something that I started realizing like a year ago when I started, going to the classics, like reading them, and I say, I mean, you read Brihad Parashara Shastra, you're going to read the significations of the notes and they're all negative.
Right.
I mean, it's all smoky, it's all horrible, and then you see the yogas for death and premature death, and sometimes Rahu is there, and you have to take that into consideration. But when you use it, it sticks. And let's be honest, we live in a secular society where a lot of people are not part of a faith. They don't follow anything, and people who come into astrology and people who come into these, I don't want to say alternate spiritualities, but people who come into these fields, let's say, are eager to they have that Venusian, impulse, I need something to fill my thirst for spirituality. And they come into this and they want that, right? And no questions asked. I just want to be filled with knowledge. And that's something that's there, and that astrologers have to take into consideration. This idea of future. I mean, this idea of modern. This idea of the modern mentality wants things to appease their ego. Unfortunately, they want things to fill their expectations. They don't want to fit. They want to make the expectations fit their expectations. They want things to fit what they want. They don't want to fit with what things are. And that's where all this modern things comes in. And then the idea of consumerist astrology, of consumerist spirituality.
That's a very good point. You're talking about the whole consumer aspect of it. So many people, you read books and you go to conferences and you talk to professional astrologers, especially Vedic astrologers, and they really get behind this idea, this notion that this is a holy science. This is a divine science.
It is.
Well, it is. I agree with that. But
here we go.
Yeah, but they say that, and then they say, okay, well, let me talk to you about how you can achieve more fame or more wealth, or how you can do things that are related to this world, and that. What you were just saying made me think of. There's a chapter I'm working on, and there was 2 lines from it that I wrote, which really I feel deals with the essence of astrology. Astrology is best for those seeking self-knowledge. And why do I say that? Because it's supposed to be a holy science. And a holy science, as you mentioned, is about transcendence. It's about seeking self-knowledge with a capital S, the big U, the wholeness of life. So astrology is best for those seeking self-knowledge, who can aim to make peace with what is, who are not so arrogant as to think it is possible to control, sedate, or even completely understand the reason for one's life experiences. It is best to let those who dwell on the negative, or who will focus more on the potential for pain, to learn directly through experience rather than through knowledge of astrology. And the reason I thought of that is because it's supposed to be a holy science, which means that you have an understanding, a faith, a feeling, a path where you know that you're here in this world for a sense of transcendence, not to get more things, not to fulfill, not to like cling to desires or to force desires to happen. In at least 3 texts I can think of, Yoga Sutras, is it in Yoga Sutras? It's definitely in the Bhagavad Gita and the Shandalya Upanishad and Vasishtha Yoga. It says, the way you live a natural and spontaneous life contentedly is to be content with that which comes to you unsought. Now, that's radical different than why most people go to astrology. So if it's supposed to be a holy science, then what do we use it for? We use it for self-knowledge in the sense of to get some perspective on what are our hang-ups? Where are we going to get snagged? Where are we going to have drawbacks that we have to work on? Not how do we achieve all these things so our desires can continue to proliferate. And I know this sounds like some kind of fanatical, fundamentalist approach to things, but again, for people who are into astrology and into the spirituality of it, I think it's important to take a real hard look at when you read those spiritual texts, what are they actually saying is part of the path?
Yes.
And if astrology is a spiritual science, the eye of the Vedas, then how can that actually really relate to it? And one final thing, and I'll turn it back over to you. One final thing that came to me in the Bhagavad Gita, towards the end, it states that we each have duties that we're meant to perform, and we have those 4 castes. The Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Sudra. That these are types of castes that we have to perform works we have to perform in the world. And in the Bhagavad Gita, it says that we are entitled, or it is best for us to do our own duty poorly than it is to do another's well. And it even goes on to say that all actions have defects in it. So even if you're trying to do your duty the best, there's still going to be defects in it. So all actions have defects in it in the same way that fire, as it burns, creates smoke. It's just part of the natural process. And coming to that, rereading that again, it occurred to me, well, if astrology is really a holy science, then it's important to recognize that maybe what it's useful for is helping a person see, all right, are most of their planets in a Brahmin sign? Are most of the planets in a Kshatriya sign? What kind of work is indicated for them to be undertaking and enduring in this life such that they're able to turn this wheel? Because yes, we want a transcendent, but there's also a line in the Bhagavad Gita that states that the person who does not help to turn this wheel while they're there, the person who tries to refrain from doing anything while they're here, is committing a sin in and of themselves. So there's so much there, spiritually speaking, between these obviously holy sciences like yoga and so on, related to astrology. But my question these days is, how do we encompass all of that such that we can work with people to encourage them in that spiritual sense and maybe try to wean them away from what you described as this kind of consumerism mentality? Because that's like taking these holy abilities, these holy capacities, and just dragging them through the mud. And it's going to help the mud work a little bit. It's going to help bless the mud a bit.
Yeah.
But it's not bringing the mud to the scriptures such that it becomes cleansed. It's not a very good analogy, but I think you get the point.
Yeah, and you've said things that are very beautifully put, and you cite this idea of the holy science from Yukteswar, which is the title of the famous book, and it is holy, and as you said, if you really follow it as a spiritual path, and I'm not saying I'm the holiest guy here, I'm not saying
we're all equally holy. It just depends on how full of ourselves we actually are. So we're all equal in that regard.
Exactly. And I'm not saying, I'm the most pious guy here, but if you really follow it, you will come inevitably to the realization of this consumerist aspect of the practice, which is part of all practices in the modern context. It's
right.
Part of you. If you're a doctor, you're going to see this happening. If you are any type of professional, I don't know, a businessman, if you are in the army, you're going to come into this idea of consumerism, of progress, of the economical, you're going to come you're going to come to that place eventually. And astrology, we're talking about that happening in astrology. And as you said, there's a really big mixture of things going on, specifically in Western Vedic astrology, and I would also say in contemporary in Indian Jyotisha, and how like Indian Jyotishis are adapting themselves and taking things from the West and using them in their practice. And you see this happening. You go to these activities where they say, this is a holy science, this and that, and then they say, oh, take this workshop, it's only $500
right.
to learn a new way to analyze Vargas that nobody has ever done that before.
Right.
And I'm not saying you shouldn't charge, because you should charge, that's part of it, but you shouldn't create nuance from nothing, right? And that has to do with the idea of progress. Oh, no, Fernando, this is the idea of progress. We're building upon. Yeah, but where are we going with this?
Right.
And a very important thing that we have to take into consideration, which kind of explains all of this, is that this was something that was reserved for a minority. When you read the classics, this is not something that the common layman would read. He was worried with his crops. He was worried with his family, with eating, with having sex. He was worried with mundane stuff. This was reserved for a minority, for the only minority that could read and write. This was reserved for a minority who had the sensibilities to understand the things that maybe you and me are realizing and just going crazy about it, or maybe laughing about it. But, most people don't have the sensibility. And that's the law of the land. I mean, the majority is just, the majority of, and you see the castes being divided. Castes are not a square building; they are a pyramid. And they go from minority to majority. And when you take this holy science, which was reserved for a minority, which was reserved for initiates, which was reserved for Brahmins, which was reserved for initiatic leagues, schools of mystery, and so on and so forth. And you take it and you free it to society, where there are no filters, where there are no league of men who control it. And at the same time, this was a minority of men, not women, just men. And I don't want to sound sexist, but that's the reality of things. Women were not relegated. They were not oppressed. They were just simply, they were expressing themselves in other parts of society. And this is why I think karmically women are so drawn to astrology these days, specifically in the modern context, because they couldn't really have done it before. Historically, we only have about, I would say, 3 references of traditional female astrologers, and they kind of all come from a Western or a Muslim context. I don't know of any famous female Jyotishis, for example. Right. From tradition, now I know there are a couple. For example, the daughter of Bibi Rahman is an astrologer. But what I mean to say is that this was for a minority, men who could read and write, who had the sensibilities, and now it's open for everyone. And this works in Spanish. I'm going to use it in English. This is a thing I say to clients. When you divulgate, that's a word, right? In English, divulgate.
What is it?
Divulgate, like you release something. Divulge.
Divulge, yeah, there you go.
Yeah, when you divulge things to the people, when you divulge holy things to the people, then the people, the vulgar people, the serfs, take it and they make it mundane, because it's part of them. And now, let me sell you these secrets of astrology. Or let me sell you these things that will help you with spirituality. That's like the Vaishya context. Oh man, I want to learn astrology so I can get more money, I can get more work. That's like more of the Shudra context. And even for the Kshatriya context, which was part of traditional, when you read Yavana Yataka, for example, when they talk about horaries, they're talking about when it's the best time to mount an invasion or your enemy, which is like Kshatriya necessities. And you see how these things, and then we have all this spaghetti, you have everything convoluted, and that's the status of things right now. And these ideas that we're talking about, that which we began with Rahu and Ketu, right?
Well,
which by the way, this video is very Rahu Ketu-esque. You know?
It's true. It's true. We're talking about the past and the future and all these things. But you know what you mentioned about you know, just to keep it clear, the idea of women in astrology. I mean, the references you made is simply because for the last 2,000 years or more, culturally speaking, that's just the way it was done.
Yes.
You know, it's not necessarily
even until you know 100 years ago.
Yeah, even up to 100 years ago, it's just that was just culturally the way it was done. You know, the good news is, and the good thing is that there are many, as you mentioned, brilliant female astrologers, kind of contributing more to it. And I think they're bringing a little more of this kind of sacred essence to it, which is really important. And you know, as we consider all of these things, you know, one time I had this thought that, you know, the secrets of astrology are still secret. You know, because someone, and I'm sure someone's going to post it as a comment here on the bottom of this video, they're going to say something like, "Yeah, Ryan, but you know, you're just sharing this stuff with everyone," which is true. But what I have a sense of is that the secrets of astrology are going to remain secret no matter what, because when someone's sharing information publicly, there will be people that are able to get what is actually being shared. And there will be people that take and do whatever they want with it, and they still don't quite understand it. So, you know, one of the things I've always recommended, you know, to people in the astrology apprenticeship program, such as yourself and others, when they're learning astrology, is not get too hung up in this idea of, you know, learn the secrets of astrology, or not get too pulled into the kind of advertising like you're going to learn a special secret. People should teach and share things as authentically as possible, and those who have the ability and have the awareness to distill the truth of it, well, they're going to naturally get the secrets. It will be revealed to them just by the nature of consciousness itself. Because, you know, you can have all the secrets in the world and you can keep them all to yourself, but because knowledge is inherent to consciousness, if someone meditates on it or works it out or thinks it through, they will figure that out themselves. That's why, you know, across the globe, so many people will make discoveries, the exact same discovery, one on one continent, one on another continent. They don't have any kind of communication together, you know. So I think it's important, you know, as you're pointing out, that culturally speaking, yes, there is a reason that it was reserved for specific groups, and that was a more, what's the word, physical or concrete or obvious manifestation of trying to keep the information as clear and pure as possible. But in our current age, with technology and books, and anyone who says they're an astrologer can get on, and if they've got enough charisma and if they've got enough intelligence, yeah, like us, yeah. Yeah, as I've said, you know, it's a good thing I've got a little bit of charisma, otherwise no one would listen to me. But you know, that's the way it goes. So now we don't necessarily have the benefit of true secret societies. And when I say that, I don't mean people trying to, you know, control the world in the way that what are those people who have all kinds of crazy ideas about the government and stuff?
Lawyers.
Lawyers. Well, I was going to say conspiracy theorists. Yeah, we don't have that benefit anymore. So now we actually have to rely on our own ability to develop our minds and our consciousness enough to do what you have done. You know, for example, I don't know, how long have we known each other? Has it been about 5 years now?
2013, 2014, I guess.
Oh, so that's a long time. Yeah, about, well, longer than that then. But in that time, you know, working with you and talking to you, you know, seeing the developments that even you have come through and come to. I remember when you first started taking classes, I was a little unsure. I was like, I don't know about this guy. I was like, I'm not sure.
Don't worry, that's the reaction everybody has with me. So
yeah.
That's modus operandi for me. Don't worry about that.
But you've studied well and you've practiced well and you're taking your work and your profession seriously, and so you're able to kind of come to these conclusions. So I think that the more we're able to encourage people to do that, the more likely that the true understanding of Rahu and Ketu, the true understanding of the Vargas and so on, that they'll have a greater capacity to really be understood well. I think it's just going to take time and discussions like this to kind of inspire people.
And that's where the term Jyotirvidya comes in. I don't know if you've heard of it, which is like the force,
right?
of Jyotisha. I mean, it's like the idea of, if you are really predisposed to learn and to open yourself to this knowledge, then the Vidya, you know, the force of Jyotish, the force of the science of life, of the holy science of light, will come through you, and you will understand that. And I remember that. You know, I remember, you know, I bought a lot of books and I didn't understand them, and I realized, you know, you're gonna understand this in the future, and thank God I did. And so, and there's some things I don't understand yet. But the thing is that the Jyotirvidya comes in, and when you read other famous astrologers from India, they say that as you get older, certain nadis open up, and you have the ability to understand things, you know, without astrology. You know, you have the ability to have that sensibility to understand things without really going through the works of a chart. And that's just part of it, and that's really the meaning of the spiritual practice,
right?
Of you know, just being where you have to be, and realizing that there's nothing more just than being where you have to be, or being where you are,
right?
And just, you know, doing what comes organically to you, and all that, and by that, I guess we can start to transcend, right? Although we have at least in my case, I have a long way to go, but
it's all relative.
Yeah, it's all relative. Yeah. But but if you go to this workshop, you will learn how to do it.
yeah. Go talk to Fernando. He'll hook you up.
Yeah. I'll hook you up very well. Yeah.
Anyway, all right. Well, we'll conclude this part of the conversation for now. And for our viewers, you know, we've had you on a few times. But how can people reach you? What is your website and the best way to get in touch with you?
Well, you know, I have a website called FernandoRaulAstrology.com. It's in Spanish, but, you know, as soon as I get the capacity to do an English version, I will. But it's basically there where you can see my things. And I also have a YouTube channel, Spanish videos. Sorry, guys. And I also have a Facebook. You can just Google Fernando Raul Astrology and something will come up.
Okay. All right. So you can find him through Googling Fernando Raul Astrology.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you for being with me again today, Fernando.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Peace.